Hello everybody. This is a special web-based session of what would have been today's class. I'm not going to do everything that we would do in class, but I'm going to try to finish this chapter on the internet. I have a bad cold today, but I am able to speak at a low tone of voice. I just can't speak for 4 hours. That's the problem. This is a kind of like a version of that lesson that we would have had. Now, today's lesson is not going to be really carefully planned and executed. I'm just going to be showing you what I'm doing on my computer, so it will be a little less organized and not quite as carefully, presented as some of the other video materials on this site. Now, we already talked about domains, and if I can go here, we finished this chapter on domain geography. But I wanted to show you that how you can get these things that we talked about. We talked about, for example, domains. For example, lcjapan.com or blogd.com or expat.org, .com, .net, .org, things like that. Where do you get these domains from? Well, there are services. This is a service called GoDaddy.com. It's one of the more famous ones. You also have something called Namecheap, which actually is, many people think is better in some ways. And on each of these, you can enter a domain name that you would like to get. So what you do is you write down the name that you think you might get. So if I say luisposa.com, for example, I can do a search. And it searches to see if that domain name is open or not. And here it is found that, oh, look at that, luisposa.com actually was already taken. luisposa.net is available, and I can get that for about $11 per year. But apparently, somebody else with my name already took the website. I can even click on this link and I can find out exactly who it was that got that, although I'd have to go through these steps, but you get the idea. So if you go to these services and you look for a domain name and you find one that's open, one that's not taken, for example, I might try something slightly different, Luis H. Posa. My middle initial is H. So if I search for that, I'm pretty sure that that is going to be free. That's going to be available. So let's wait for it to come through, and sure enough, here we go. luishposa.com is available. So if I clicked on this and if I went through to the shopping cart, answered all of these questions about do I want this service or do I want that service, in the end, I'd pay $11 per each year that I want to keep it, and you can renew it as time goes forward. And then you have your domain name. Now, after that, you need something called a web host. This is the one that I use. It's called Surpass Hosting. And they have several plans. Now, these are the people who actually have the computers. They have what's called a server farm. I can show you a picture of one right here. This is, in just a moment, you'll see, a server farm. There's lots and lots of computers. It has to be air conditioned so that it doesn't overheat. But all of the many websites are kept on these server computers. There are hundreds of computers here, and each one could have dozens of websites on them. So that's what a web host actually looks like. And here are the plans that they offer. You see that with different plans at different prices, you can get different amounts of disk space, of bandwidth. You can have anywhere from 5 to 10 to an unlimited number of domain names hosted on one account. You can also get other services such as, for example, email. Email is generally given away unlimited for free, but you see that you can have webmail or you can have POP or IMAP accounts. So that is the web host. So once again, in order to build your own website, you need to first get a domain name, and then you need to get a web host, somebody that will host your account. So let's take a look at this process a little bit differently. Let's step back and let's take a look at what the internet is and how you can get a website on it. Now remember, there is a guy that I play who said what the internet was, an old guy who was in the United States Senate. I think I've got the sound here.
And again, the internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes.
So remember, he said that the internet is a series of tubes. Now, if we take him at his word, if we take him literally, we can imagine the internet is this big tube. Well, how does that help us? What does that mean? Well, let's think about it this way. Remember protocols? Email protocols, web protocols, file transfer protocols. All of these protocols are in the internet, and you might think of them as tubes inside the internet tube. Now, actually, what you can do is that you can slice that tube, and one slice of the internet tube is your computer. Your computer has all of these protocols. It has World Wide Web protocols in your browser. It has email protocols in your email program, so forth and so on. If you have Skype, it'll have the Skype protocol for chat. So your computer has all these protocols. And if you put your computer together with all the other computers on the internet, you get the internet tube. So you might think of it as being that way. All right, now back to domains. As you recall, you want to get a domain so that you can build your own website. Now, it's not just a website. You can also have email and other services as well. But the domain name is an important part. You need a name so that people can remember the address, because otherwise the address is too complex. Now, after you get the domain name, then you go to the web host. The web host gives you space on their hard disk drive, and in that hard disk drive there's a folder, and in that folder you have your website, which has text files and images and so forth. That makes up the website. You can also set up your email. You can set up a file server. You can set up many, many different kinds of protocols and services. And that becomes your home, or you could say your business on the internet. Remember, the domain name is really just the same as an IP address. So IP address, domain name. You get the hard disk drive with the folder, and if you do that, then you have your files up on the server, and you can make your website. You can have email, you can have file transfer, you can have chat, you can have discussion rooms, all different kinds of things on your domain. Let's go back to the website. So I just wanted to mention that to finish up the idea of domains. And the next chapter, which is about protocols, actually has most of the information that we have talked about in the past and that we just talked about right now. Here's the Ted Stevens explaining the internet. Here's a few examples of protocols, the internet tube, and what I call the internet salami theory, that you can slice salami and there are these little white dots in it. You can think of the white dots as being the protocols in the internet salami, or the internet tube. Okay, and that's the end of that chapter. So let's go on to the next chapter. Okay, now the next chapter is about the World Wide Web. And this is actually something that a lot of people kind of confuse. Let's go back to this presentation. People confuse it because they think that the internet and the World Wide Web are the same thing, but they're not. The internet is actually the larger structure, and the World Wide Web is one of the protocols, or one of the services that's inside the internet. So remember, the internet is the larger structure. The World Wide Web is one part of the internet. All right, now, where did the World Wide Web begin? Well, actually, a lot of people think it started in the United States, but that's not true. The World Wide Web was actually created in Europe. It was a project headed by a British scientist named Tim Berners-Lee. Here are some photographs of him, and he is now Sir Berners-Lee. He's a British scientist, and he was knighted by the Queen for his contributions to the internet. He actually began the project that we now refer to as the World Wide Web. He created the idea of taking hypertext links, or what we call links, and putting them together on the internet so that people could share information in a very easy and convenient way. Now, that was the beginning of it. That was back in 1990. But a big step forward was back in the United States when a student who had received funds from Al Gore created a browser called Mosaic. And actually, I have Mosaic on my computer here. Let's see if I can get it back up. There we go. This is Mosaic. This was the first real browser. This is not commercial. This is something that was created as part of a project at the University of Illinois. You can see that it's actually a very simple kind of web browser. It can't do most of the things that browsers do today. It can't do any of the animations or the videos or something like that. Web pages were very simple because connections were very slow. Now, Mark Andreessen was kind of a smart guy. He knew that there was a future in this. So he took this idea and he created a private company called Netscape. And they created a browser called Navigator, released in 1994. Netscape was eventually destroyed, more or less, by Microsoft when they tried to take over the browser market with Internet Explorer. The company Netscape was changed into something called Mozilla, and the Navigator browser was renamed Firefox. So you still use that today, and it's actually gaining in popularity. But remember, at this time in the early 1990s, most people did not have a connection to the internet. Most people had to use the private services, and these were walled gardens: Prodigy, CompuServe, America Online, Genie, and so they were locked into these private networks with private content. You couldn't communicate with the outside. Well, that's when we got ISPs. That's Internet Service Providers, not Ikebukuro Shopping Plaza. This is the Internet Service Providers. These guys right here, Internet Service Providers. They started appearing around 1993 or so and really became popular, much more popular in the mid-1990s, around 1995. For $20 a month, or that area, you could get a connection. Using a dial-up modem, you could connect to a local phone that would connect you to the internet, the real internet, the one that connected to everything else. And this really changed things. Now, when you connected, you used what was called a modem. Let me show you one of those. This is what it was. Now, this machine actually was between your computer and the telephone line. You would plug the telephone line into this machine, and then another line comes from this machine to your computer. And this machine would take the digital information from your computer and it would change it to sound waves that would travel over your telephone line. It was very slow. 14,400 baud, or bits per second, which is incredibly slow compared to what we have today. You can read the website, and I give you some examples of how long it takes to download things. Very long time. And this is what it sounded like. It was very noisy. Your computer would actually dial the phone number, wait for the other line to answer, the other phone to answer, and it would connect with it using this kind of staticky sounding signal. This is what it sounded like. And that hissing at the end, that was the actual connection that was being formed. That was, if you picked up the phone while on the internet, that's what you would hear. Now, this kind of communication disappeared in the early 2000s when we got DSL, and it was handled all electronically. There was no audio. And today, with fiber optics or even wireless connections as well. All right, so with that kind of connection, people were able to get connected to the internet. And once they're connected to the internet, they could get online and they could see websites using the Netscape Navigator browser. They could send emails to each other as much as they wanted to. They didn't have to stay within the one area that was controlled by an online service like AOL. They could go anywhere they wanted to. This is a new freedom that no one had had before. And suddenly, every company was making websites. Everybody was making websites, from personal websites. Even some people started things like blogs back then. But mostly there was CNN.com or the WhiteHouse.gov or all of these different websites that had all this different information. And it became a great resource for people to use. It became so popular that there was a stock bubble. Let me actually go to Google's finance, and we can see what it looked like. Let's look, for example, for Microsoft and see if we can see what their stock price looked like historically. Now, this is their stock price today, but if we stretch back in time, we can see what Microsoft's stock looked like through the year 2000. And take a look here. Okay, so here you can see the stock price of Microsoft.com over the 1990s. Notice that 1991, 92, 93, 94, not very much growth. But then suddenly, around 95 to 96, boom, it goes way, 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 way up, and it continues until about the year 2000. That's when the bubble burst. But you can see that there is a huge increase in prices, and some companies got amazing increase in prices. These little green tabs right here show stock splits, which means that it was actually an even bigger rise than it might look like on this chart. So really, during the late 1990s, businesses just were really, really exploded with business, and they really, really got a lot of benefits. Almost anything that had the name Internet in it or web in it was considered a valuable commodity, and people would pour millions of dollars into these things. So it created the Internet boom, or the Internet bubble, that lasted up until the year 2000. That's when the bubble burst, and we had a little bit of economic trouble because of that. Okay, let's take a look, for example, at the White House website. You can see here that is very, very simple. The main page is kept, very, very sparse. They don't want to have any extra photographs or any extra files here because people had very slow connections to the internet, they really couldn't do very much more. They could do some audio, they could do photographs, but there was no video at the time, really, or at least not very much, and it certainly wasn't very good. You could go to other pages and get photographs, but they kept that to a minimum, because it was, again, very simple at the time, very low bandwidth. Compare that to the same website, whitehouse.gov, today, and you can see it's very different. Large images, you've got probably scripts going here, and you've got search engines, and you've got all these different things. I'm sure you can get high-resolution video. It's really changed quite a bit since those early days. All right, so that is basically how the World Wide Web developed from the mid-1990s to today. And let's go on to the next chapter. Okay, now the next chapter is about email. Everybody has email accounts nowadays. They're standard. And most people use webmail, but there's actually two different kinds of mail. There's webmail, which is what most people have, and then there's something called an email client. Let's take a look at webmail first. Now, webmail is something like Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, or Google Mail, Gmail. Lakeland College has a form of Gmail called LCJ Mail. I personally think Google or Gmail is the best service. It tends to have the best features and is the most powerful kind. Webmail started back in the 1990s, actually, And for a long time, until about 2004, it had very low capacity. Some of them only had 2 or just 4 megabytes of space, and this would fill up really quickly. But today, it's much bigger. In 2004, Gmail came out. Gmail opened up the doors. They started offering a gigabyte and more of space, and so people had a lot more room than they used to have. Now, webmail is really great because it is portable. It's mobile. With webmail, your email, all of your email, including email from 10 years ago, is kept on a server on the internet. Today we say it's in the cloud. And that email just stays there forever. And so you can always look it up. But because it's on the web, that means that you can log in from any computer and use the computer as a terminal to access your email. So no matter where you go, no matter whose computer you're using, you can always check your email and you can always use your email. So that's a big advantage for this. This is also relatively easy to set up. And nowadays it is becoming more and more powerful. There are even special features. For example, this is my Gmail account. And if you go into the settings, you can see that you can actually also set it up so that it can use pop mail. In other words, you can not only have the webmail, you can also, in addition to webmail, you can use an email client. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But there are also other things. For example, it has several services. This is one service called Google Drive. And this allows you to use a folder on your computer that's called Google Drive. And all you have to do is drop files into this folder, and your files will be automatically uploaded to your Google Drive. So all I'd have to do is drop something in, and then after a little while, I would refresh the drive, and I could find the file in here. So then you could open it up using one of these services. For example, you could create or open up existing documents, presentations, spreadsheets, forms, drawings, all of these things, just like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or other services as well. That's all free. It's just like having Microsoft Office, but it's free and it's part of your email account. And you can store files here. Gmail today gives customers between 10 and 25 gigabytes. If I go to my Gmail inbox and I check down here, this account has only 10 gigabytes. But I've noticed that my LCJmail account, at least mine, since I've had it for many years, that has 25 gigabytes. So you can save a lot of files in there. So webmail has a lot of really good features to it. However, it is kind of slow. And while you can open up more than one account at one time, it has to be accounts for the same service. A much more flexible and powerful kind of email service is using what's called an email client. So I've got one right here. This is Apple's Mail. And you can see that I've got many of my email accounts over here. Here's my iCloud email account, my Gmail account, my my LCJmail account. This is my blogs account, my SoftBank account, my main personal account, my Shiba's blog, and so forth. This one right here is a junk account. I use it for signing up for things. And I can do very, very fast searches. I can have a lot of advanced features, and I can check all of these email accounts automatically. You might hear during my presentation here in the video, you might hear a little beep from time to time, like a dun. And that is actually my email program telling me I've got new email. So it's actually very convenient in that way. It's very powerful and it's very fast. Webmail is slow because it's actually a web page and it has to refresh and go get information from servers. The email client can get email immediately. And so it can search records very quickly. So it's actually much more convenient in several different ways. However, email clients usually are only on one machine. Now you can have them on more than one computer, but it usually is most efficient and most organized when you only use it with one machine. That means if you don't have your computer with your email client, you can't get your email. So you can, however, combine things. You can have hybrid accounts, and these hybrid accounts can have both webmail and they can have client email at the same time. So, for example, as I showed you just a moment ago, I'm able to use my email client to get, for example, LCJ mail or Gmail. Those are web-based email, but I'm able to also, by using the settings, which you can see right here, I'm also able to enable what's called POP. Now, POP is for clients. So by enabling POP, I enabled POP here, I made it so that using my email client software, Apple's Mail in my case, I'm able to access this account, but I'm also able to access it on the internet. There's some email right there. There we go. See, I got a message right here. So it's always checking my email and always telling me when I'm getting something new. So you can have hybrid accounts. You can have webmail and client email at the same time if you want. So there's different ways of doing this, but the two basic forms are webmail and client email. All right. Now, another thing I'd like to point out are the protocols. Whenever email is coming in from somebody else to your account, we use the POP or IMAP protocols. POP protocol is used with an email client, and in this case, all of the email is downloaded to your email client. IMAP is a special form which could download to your client, but it also keeps all of your email on the server, very much like a web-based email service. But you'll have one of these two. One of these two will be used if you're using an email client. Outgoing email, when you send email, you can use SMTP. That is a separate server. So actually, when you're receiving and sending email, you're not just using one service, you're actually using two different services. So when you receive mail, you're using the POP server, and when you send mail, you're using the SMTP server. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to use the same account to send, to send and receive email. You can see, for example, that here I've got an email setup where I've got email that's leaving my account. I'm sorry, that's coming into my account. This is the POP3 protocol right here. Notice I'm using the POP3 server at blogd.com. But when I send email using SMTP, I use a different server. It doesn't have to be the same server as the email account. Even though my email account is blogd.com, the actual server I use is, in this case, my ISP's email server. So when you're receiving email, you do have to use the server for your account. But when you're sending email, you can use any email server. Doesn't matter if the names match or not. Okay, now when you're sending email, this is a representation of what happens. So you send the email from your computer. It gets sent to the SMTP server. That can be really any SMTP server. It doesn't have to be the one that's attached to your account. That server then sends the email out over the internet until the packets come to the server with the recipient's account, the person who you're sending it to. This is where that person's account is located. That's the POP or IMAP server. And then it uses POP and IMAP to send the email to the recipient's computer. So this is generally how email moves on the internet. Now, something I should note is that you should be very careful of attachments when you're getting email. Many times you'll get email with zip, exe, or other kinds of extensions on files, and those very often are malware, viruses, worms, trojans, various kinds of malware that can and will infect your computer. You should only open attachments that you know 100% are real ones from real people. If you read this chapter on the webpage, you'll get some clues as to how to do that. That it must be expected, that there should be specific information in the email to prove that it came from somebody that you know, and then you can also call up your friend or whoever it is and ask them, did you send this to me? Just to make sure. Now another problem is spam. We get lots of spam. You might not think you get spam, but actually you might get a lot of spam. It's just filtered out before it comes to your email account. There's actually many places on the web that filter email, and oftentimes it's filtered before it even comes to you. But your email account will have a spam folder. If you go to Google Mail, for example, you might notice that there is a spam folder. Let's see, if I click more, it's probably there. And here we go. There's the spam right there. Turns out I don't have very much unread spam right now, but there's a spam box, and I could take a look at what email I've got in spam. So this is the spam that I've gotten at my Gmail account. Surprisingly little. Usually I have more than that, but spam boxes usually empty out after a month or so. So this is probably only, yeah, see, here we go. It says right here, messages that have been in spam more than 30 days will be automatically deleted. So that's only my last 30 days of spam. That's still a very small amount of spam. For example, the spam I've gotten on my client, actually I've gotten 1,621 different instances of spam from about a couple months ago, actually. Really, this is from July. And no, I'm sorry, that's all read spam. Let's see. When does the unread spam begin? Not recently. Let's see. This is all marked as read, so it's not showing up in that number. Let's see. Wow, I've read most of my spam apparently. Here we go. Okay, so I stopped reading my spam. I didn't really read it, but I stopped marking it as read around September 26th, so about a month ago. So that means in 1 month, I've gotten about 1,600 spam messages. That's a lot of spam. So how do you avoid spam? 97% of all email is spam. At least that's what they figure. Most email is spam. So how can you do this? Well, number one, spam filters. Now this is usually automatic. If you open up a Gmail account, for example, it automatically has spam filters built in. So most people don't even think about it. But there's other ways that you can get spam. For example, you sign up for a website or you register for a website. Most websites today, if you want to leave a message or make a comment or get some sort of service, you have to sign up. You have to register. And they always ask for your email. Now, they don't ask for it so that they can contact you in an emergency. That's just what they say. Really, they want that so that they can sell your address and use it for spam. So what you really should do is that when you sign up for an account, you should use a junk account. You should make an extra account that's just for this. You go to Gmail or some other place and you can just sign up for an account. Or you can actually go to a very clever site which is called 10-Minute Mail. And 10-Minute Mail will actually give you an email account for 10 minutes. So you can use this email address to sign up, and you'll even get your messages here. You can get your messages here so that if they send you a confirmation email, that you can read it and you can click on the link and you can make them think it's a real email address. If it takes more than 10 minutes, you can ask for another 10 minutes. But after you finish using it, it just disappears and you never see it again and you don't get spam. So that's a really good way to avoid getting spam on your site. Another way is don't publish your main address on the internet. A lot of people will do this. They'll put up on message boards or even on their main website, they'll put their email address right up on the website. If you do that, you will get spam because there are many spammers who use programs that search the internet, and they find out email addresses whenever they appear on a site, and then they use that to send you spam. So don't publish your actual address on the internet if you can avoid it. Another trick is don't answer spam. Never answer spam. Don't even answer it to complain. Don't answer it to say, I will never buy your product. Don't answer it at all. Because if you answer it, then they know that you read it. And they know that your email address is live. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, most email addresses that exist are dead accounts. People open them and then they don't use them. I don't know how many, but I would guess that the most email addresses don't work anymore. So spammers hate those. They don't like those. So if they can find out that your email address is active and you're reading the spam, they'll love that. And they'll send you more spam, no matter what you say. And they'll sell that to other spammers, and you'll just get much more spam. So never answer spam. And of course, never buy anything, ever. That would be the worst thing you could possibly do. That supports the spammers. Please never buy anything that's advertised by email. It's a terrible idea. Now, there's another trick that the spammers use to find out if you're reading their email. It's called HTML graphics. Now, if we go to my email account and we take a look at my spam, you'll notice that there's no images. There are these little broken image links right here. So I'll get another one. Here's one. See, there's several images here. And what are those? Well, those are not images. They are links to images. It's HTML. It's just like a web page. Now, if you have your HTML graphics turned on, you'll see those images. But in order for your computer to get the images, it needs to go to the website and ask for them. And when that happens, the spammers know that you're reading the email. And again, they'll save your address and they'll send more spam and they'll sell your address to other spammers as well. So there is usually, nowadays I think always, an option in your settings to turn off your HTML graphics. Now I have the settings here. Let me see if I can find that. I believe in Gmail it's under General. And let's see, Conversation, External, here we go. It's under, on this site, it's under External Content. And I say always ask before displaying external content. What that means is that it will not show images unless I give it permission. And that way the spammers can't see that I'm looking at their email, and that way I'll avoid getting more spam. So turn off your HTML graphics, turn off your external graphics. And then also you should be considerate. Don't give other people's email address to the spammers. And that includes news websites. There are some websites you go to and it says, tell a friend. And then when you click that, it says, well, give us your friend's email address. And you might think nothing of that. But when you give them your friend's email address, your friend gets spammed. So please don't do that. Please don't do that. Okay, so that is the chapter on email. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. Now, the last chapter is miscellaneous, or connecting to the internet. Here it's under Internet Connections. I should change this title, actually. Now, Japan has very fast internet connections, but it wasn't always so. Actually, in the beginning, everybody had slow internet connections. When they connected to their ISPs, originally, they had very low speed internet connections. It was not broadband. Broadband is a high-speed internet connection. Back in the 1990s, we had low-speed internet connections. The speed was very slow in bits per second. As I said before, only about 14,400 bits per second. And you could not download things very fast at that speed. For example, at a 14.4 kilobit per second connection, if you wanted to download a 1 megabyte file, it would take 10 minutes. Many photographs on the web today are 1 MB, and we download them in just a few seconds. So back in the 1990s, it was much, much slower. So things changed over time. We began with dial-up. As I said, that was just actually 0.05 megabits. It was only about 56.6 kilobits per second at its fastest. Dial-up was that machine I showed you, where your computer would actually dial a telephone number. Now, around the year, into the late 1990s, around the year 2000, we also had ISDN. That allowed you to get a digital line that was twice as fast as dial-up. It was still slow by today's standards, but it was actually a much better connection than just dial-up. But the problem with both of these is that they used your telephone line. So if you wanted to make a phone call, or if you received a phone call, you'd have to hang up from the internet. So it was very inconvenient. Later, we got cable TV and ADSL. Cable TV had the down point of being shared by many people in the neighborhood. So even though the speeds were high, up to 100 megabits per second, unfortunately, because dozens and dozens of people are using them, you would get very slow times, especially late at night. ADSL was a big improvement. ADSL used standard telephone lines, so it could be done very cheaply, and you could get fairly high speeds, up to 50 megabits per second. However, ADSL had a distance limit. You could only use it up to about 2 kilometers, and even at 2 kilometers, your speed would be much slower. It only worked well if you were less than 1 kilometer away from the switching station at your telephone company or at your ISP. Today we have fiber optic, which actually gets up to 1 gigabit per second or more. And that is extremely fast. It's one of the best types. But some buildings cannot take fiber optic cables, so they use something called VDSL, which is a combination of ADSL and fiber optic. It takes fiber optic up to your neighborhood, and then it switches to ADSL. It creates kind of like a switching station right near your home, so the ADSL is able to go at a much higher speed than normal. So these are the different ways of connecting your home to the internet using cables. So things are getting faster and faster, and there are actually other ways to connect to the internet. You can connect, for example, through Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi can be found at various businesses and universities, places where you work. There are even some cities, a few cities, that have city-wide Wi-Fi. They have Wi-Fi all over the city. Seattle has it downtown. I believe Mountain View, California has the whole city covered by it. And that's a high-speed connection, or it could be, if they want to provide that, a high-speed connection using wireless signals. You can also get what's called a personal hotspot. A hotspot is whenever you have a Wi-Fi signal that you can connect to. It's a little machine that actually connects using 3G or 4G cell phone data signals, and then translates that into Wi-Fi, so you can carry it around with you. There are several terms that I'd like you to read here and get to know. I'm not going to talk about them right now. WiMAX is another service. This is sometimes called 4G. This is something which gets a fairly fast connection rate, about 40 megabits per second, so very similar to DSL, but it's wireless, and sometimes the reception is not so good. They are upgrading to a new system called WiMAX 2, which will get speeds about 4 times as fast, about 165 megabits per second. But now we have a new technology called LTE, and LTE is the 4G data communications technology for cell phones. So if you get a new iPhone 5 from KDDI or from SoftBank, you'll get LTE, which is at least 75 or maybe 100 megabits per second, almost as fast as a fiber optic connection, but it comes with your cell phone. You can either get a cell phone plan in which you can use what's called tethering. You can make your telephone into a Wi-Fi hotspot. LTE will come to your telephone, and then your telephone will give Wi-Fi connections to your computer or your tablet. Or you could get a 4G LTE personal hotspot, which also gets a high speed and can connect to many different devices. So this is just a quick overview of various ways to connect to the internet. That finishes the lecture for the internet unit. So please make sure you read all of these web pages and make sure that you understand all the terms. And probably next week on Friday, we'll have a quiz on the internet. So please make sure that you read up and that you're ready to take that test next week on Friday. If you have any questions, send me an email, and I hope to see you next Wednesday. If I'm not fine by then I'll be in trouble, but I think I'll be okay. Okay, one final thing, your assignments. All right, so you have a couple of assignments that I want you to do. Everybody must do these assignments, and you must send the results by Tuesday evening. Sooner is better. Okay, number one, you want to go to GoDaddy.com or Namecheap.com. Find 3 domain names. Use the search. Find 3 domain names which are not used by anybody. Once you've found them, write them down. For example, www.myname.com. Do not buy anything. I'm not asking you to buy anything. Just search for names and see if you can find a name that you can give me that's not taken yet. Okay, so that's the first assignment. The second assignment is to create a fake email account. Now, when I say fake, I mean it's just, it won't be one that you use personally for anything real. It's a junk email account. Go to Gmail or Yahoo Mail or wherever and create a new email account. Don't forget to save the username and password so that you can get into it later on. But this is going to be your junk email account. So if you sign up for or register at websites, you can use this junk email so that if they send you spam, it will come to this account and not to your real account. So once you have this account, use it to send me your homework. So number 3 is to send me your homework. Now it's very simple. Just send me an email. Make sure your real name is in it so I know who it is. If you don't put your name somewhere in the email, I will not know who it is. So make sure to add your name and then just include the 3 domain names that you found in assignment number 1. So send me the email by Tuesday evening. So I should get an email from everybody, and the email should be from a junk email account, and it should have 3 domain names which are not yet bought or used by anybody. Domain names which you found using GoDaddy or Namecheap. Okay, those are your assignments. If you have any questions, again, send me an email. Have a good night or day or wherever it is that you're looking at this right now. I hope to see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.